upon my short experience in the field, with the field of police investigations, the embarrassment suffered by the prosecution at that preliminary hearing as a result of Fisher's haphazard investigation is the worst I have seen in any case that I've ever been the object of. Of course, the bottom line of that, the handling of Ms. Harder was that she not only failed to identify me in the courtroom, or that is, did not identify me in the courtroom, but in fact identified the undersheriff who had accompanied me from Utah to Aspen just a few weeks before. The name of the undersheriff was Ben Myers, by the way, a law enforcement official of questionable character. He had held a number of jobs in a variety of law enforcement agencies throughout his career, and there were a number of rumors, most probably unsubstantiated, of course, as far as I can say, that concerning misconduct in the various agencies that had employed him. Interestingly enough, the last position he'd held before coming to Aspen was, before coming to the Pickett County Sheriff's Office as undersheriff, was as chief of police in Grand Junction, Colorado, where there had been a series of murders of young women. My understanding is he took a great deal of pressure was exerted on him for the failure of his department to solve these murders, but I don't believe that was the sole reason for him leaving. I think while investigation of his past might turn up a lot of trash and a lot of dirt, I doubt that it would really mean anything for this case, since Ben Myers himself was not a factor in the investigation or prosecution of my case, other than the fact that he was identified as most resembling the man that Mrs. Harder saw on the night of Karen Campbell's disappearance.
I think that it's certainly got to plague the law enforcement people up there, wondering if there's something about the Pacific Northwest that encourages that kind of crime. But it's not just two. There are, if you've looked at the list of unsolved homicides that could be of a serial type, there are dozens of unsolved homicides in the Pacific Northwest over the past 10 years. Mm-hmm. Unsolved, not even linked to a particular series.
Right.
And it's clear somebody's doing it. Okay, somebody's doing it. Okay, and I said, you don't just have the Green River Killer up there. You've probably got 5 to 10 other guys doing their thing up there, in one way or another. This is the scary thing. There could be a couple Lake and Ings up in the foothills. And nobody in Northern California, there was no big stink about a serial murder pattern down in Northern California. Nobody was aware of any group of disappearances that were suspiciously related. And yet you had this ongoing thing, but it was like, if a tree falls down in the woods, does it make sound, kind of thing. Well, if a person disappears and there's no body, is there a murder? Okay, that's the same kind of thing going on. And so, sure, you've got these two, but the Pacific Northwest has a lot more too. And I do think there's something. I don't know. I mean, unlike you, I don't have access to all the data to know, where the various serial murders that have serial murder patterns that have been identified have occurred. But I do think the Pacific Northwest has more than its share. Okay.
Certainly does.
For what? I mean, look at not just Seattle and Portland, but look north of the border. Look at Vancouver. They've had a couple up there over the years.
We've had several of them to look at, and you're right, they have considered the links there.
Raul Sanchez Zamudio, a 41-year-old counselor at a county-operated home for juvenile delinquents, was arraigned. And again, you get these people in charge of juvenile delinquents. remember way back, and I want to update it, the Charles Ng, Leonard Lake, Clarilyn Blazos case with Calaveras County with umpteen corpses, body bags taken out, about 36 it seemed, and Leonard Lake bit the cyanide bullet rather than face investigations when he was picked up by the police, and Charles Ng is in Canada fighting extradition. I think he'll be home soon to be charged with 3 or 4 murder cases. But Clarilyn Blazos, whose parents owned the property, still own it for all purposes, where a bunker was built for torture, and this was an occult group but they were involved, I believe, in much higher political connections that portend something very dangerous and serious. I mentioned those before. This Paul Seshola, who was sending arms to Iran, who worked with Cyrus Hashemi and Mr. Khashoggi, Adnan Khashoggi, the usual team of the CIA front-runners for guns, drugs, subterfuge. Mr. Paul Cutter has the same attorney, Mr. Carroll, that Clarilyn Blazos has. And there are indications to me, a lot of them, that this is a very, very political case. But Clarilyn works for the juvenile delinquents, too. She even took juvenile delinquents to the property up there where they had videotapes and photographed, I don't know, couldn't be tortured because they went back to San Jose, but these young people were taken up there to the bunker for a weekend or weekends, plural, I don't know. So again, Raul Zamudio is a counselor at a county, paid by the county, operated home for juvenile delinquents. And how bad are the county homes or the fundings of federal and state money that the people who are handling these affairs are involved in satanic rituals, in the occult, and so forth? According to the police report released Friday, when they searched Zamudio's Hollister home, they found an altar and items that an expert in the occult said linked to the occult fascination with fertility, sexuality, and virginity, and also, you might say, with murder, right? Okay? Zamudio, since 1984, that goes back 4 years ago, has been working with delinquents, and so much for that.
An exhaustive investigation into charges of child abuse at the U.S. Military Academy at West Point is over tonight. Eyewitness News first broke that story a year ago. Now Louis Jean tells us even though federal officials admit there were cases of abuse, no one is going to jail.
Federal authorities say roughly 20 children complained of being sexually abused at the West Point Daycare Center. A federal grand jury spent nearly 5 months looking into those charges. Tonight, Eyewitness News is told no criminal indictments will be returned.
We endeavored very, very hard to make this case because of the obvious nature of the charges. The age of the children, of course, was probably the single biggest difficulty in piercing through and determining accurately and fairly what occurred.
3 adults were the grand jury targets, 2 of them former teachers at the daycare center. The victims were 2 and 3 years old at the time of the alleged attacks. 1 little girl brought to a hospital with vaginal bleeding. There was certainly something going on there, but the U.S. Attorney says the evidence just won't support criminal indictments. Army Doctor Captain Walter Grote and his wife Mary first told Eyewitness News about the alleged abuse at West Point's daycare center a year ago September. Tonight, they reacted to the grand jury's report.
Everything that we did regarding this issue, of course, was in terms of the love we have for our daughter. And regardless of what the grand jury did today, that will never change. And it's between this individual and God, you know, from now on.
We have to feel somewhat satisfied that it was verified that child abuse did occur at West Point.
The U.S. Attorney says even though no one will be criminally charged in this case, he wants to provide enough information to West Point officials for them to take administrative action against individuals. Louis Young, Channel 7 Eyewitness News.